The story follows Adonijah, whose name literally means eternity. She was born a princess daughter of the emperor and the late empress, Diana, who died giving birth to her. Before her death, Diana left her baby a mysterious magical kiss, though no one knew exactly what kind of power it carried. After losing his wife, the emperor went completely off the rails. He ordered everything she ever touched to be burned and destroyed. The only thing he spared was the baby, Adonijah. But instead of love, she got the royal cold shoulder. Her father ignored her, so the servants did the same, figuring, if even the emperor doesn't care, why should we? Even as a baby, Adonijah had strange experiences. She once wandered into a magical world where a voice called out to her. There, she found a book that showed her entire life, everything that would happen to her. Shocked, she read that one day she'd be accused of black magic, and her own father would lock her away in a tower forever. Every night, her father's icy stare haunted her dreams. The only warmth in her life came from Lillian, a kind-hearted servant who had once been her mother's friend. Lillian gave up her noble life just to stay and care for the lonely princess. Even as a toddler, Adonijah knew her life was headed for disaster. She couldn't fight back yet, but she understood she'd have to change her fate somehow. Her biggest obstacle? Her father, Emperor Cloud, a man so powerful he could wipe out an entire kingdom alone. And that's my dad, she thought bitterly. 3 years passed, and things brightened a little. More maids joined the palace staff, enchanted by Adonijah's sweetness and charm. But among them was one greedy maid who only cared about stealing treasures that once belonged to the late empress. When Adonijah asked what she was looking for, the maid brushed her off, assuming she was just some random gardener's kid, and told her to show her where the gold was. Adonijah, realizing the woman's intent, mischievously led her to fields of sunflowers and wheat instead. Then, pretending to be helpful, she innocently mentioned that there were still utensils decorated with gems left in the palace. The maid fell for it, thinking the little girl was her partner in crime. She started stuffing jewels into bags, and that's when Adonijah struck. She grabbed the jewelry first, and when the woman tried to attack her, the princess hurled all the decorations at her. The commotion brought the other maids running, who caught the thief red-handed. But Adonijah knew it wasn't just luck. In the book of her future, she'd seen this same maid try to rob and stab Lillian. By acting early, she'd saved her caretaker and secretly kept the jewels for herself, knowing she'd need them one day. Meanwhile, Emperor Cloud remained as cold as ever. When his assistant, Felix, reported the incident and mentioned that his daughter had bravely stopped a thief, the emperor didn't even flinch. Somewhere far away, a man sensed that the destiny of the entire empire was beginning to change and that its source was inside the palace. Adonijah realized she wasn't the main heroine of this story, just a side character. And when she turned 12, things would only get worse. She'd meet her half-sister Jeanette, a beautiful, elegant girl blessed with magic and possibly their father's love. Adonijah didn't want that future, the rejection, the exile, the pain. So before her 8th birthday, she started hoarding coins and jewels, planning to run away with Lillian one day. She even hid gems in kitchen utensils, though that sometimes left her covered in chocolate after snacking on sweets. One day, while washing her hands at a fountain, she caught her reflection, her mother's face, but her father's eyes. Maybe he hates me because I only got his looks, not his magic, she thought. She wandered into the forest to hide her treasures, scaring off a squirrel in the process. But when she returned later, she found the same squirrel digging up her stash. Panicking, she bribed it with a peanut and went deeper into the woods, where she discovered a strange underground vault filled with little golden cherubs. She bit one to check, yep, real gold. And that's when she ran straight into her father, Emperor Cloud himself. It was their first real meeting. The emperor froze, stunned by how much she looked like the late empress. Adonijah, on the other hand, was terrified. This wasn't supposed to happen until she was 8. Cloud's face gave away nothing, and even his aide Felix seemed nervous. Then, breaking the tension, the emperor casually commented that she was a bit chubby and tugged at her cheeks. Finally, he ordered Felix to prepare tea because, apparently, the mighty emperor had decided to have tea time with his daughter. Something sweet was served. Adonijah barely touched her dessert, too stunned by the man before her. Sitting right in front of her was the man who, according to the book of her fate, would one day hate her, accuse her of witchcraft, and lock her in a tower. Yet here he was, calmly sipping tea. Cloud watched his shy daughter in silence until she quietly confirmed she could speak. Felix tried to ease the tension by saying children were often shy and got kicked out so father and daughter could talk alone. Cloud commented on her name, Adonijah, eternity and immortality, worthy of a royal heir. He even admitted envy. Despite killing his tyrant brother to take the throne, his own name felt less noble. Remembering the late Empress Diana, who'd chosen the name, softened him. When he asked who taught her manners, she proudly said, Lillian. Cloud recalled the maid begging to raise the child and had agreed without thinking. Then came the tense question, do you know who I am? Adonijah froze. Felix had told her to say, Your Majesty, but she blurted, You're my father, expecting punishment. She panicked, but Cloud's eyes lit up with joy. Later, Felix returned her to the worried servants, announcing that the emperor wanted to see her again, shocking everyone. When Cloud summoned Lillian and Adonijah, he thanked the maid for raising his daughter, claiming royal duties had kept him away, but that Adonijah would now live by his side. Everyone rejoiced except Adonijah, who still suspected her father might be a demon in royal robes. Her life changed overnight. Daily tea with the emperor, luxurious treatment, and new clothes. Yet she clung to her secret plan to escape before turning 8, taking her saved coins and jewels. Cloud, meanwhile, grew intrigued by her. He noticed her love for shiny things and began enjoying their awkward, sweet tea times. For the first time, she dared to hope he might truly love her. Then came the trip to the lake. Dressed beautifully, she beamed when Cloud called her healthy and plump, taking it as a compliment, and even told him he looked handsome. He remained unreadable. They boarded a small boat, though Adonijah couldn't swim. As Cloud steered the boat with magic, she admired his radiant golden hair and wondered if her blue eyes matched his. Then she spotted a glowing lotus, reached for it, and fell into the water. Dragged down by weeds, she thought it was the end, until Cloud dove in and saved her, drying her instantly with magic. Calm but firm, he declared, Tomorrow, I'll teach her to swim. I won't let her be defenseless again. Later, Lillian explained that the glowing lotuses were magical traps, affecting only those without magic, making Adonijah the most vulnerable in the palace. That night, Cloud returned to the lake, where the lotuses formed an illusion of his late wife, Diana. For the first time, he admitted he no longer hated his daughter. The next morning, Adonijah awoke to chaos, a crowd of servants kneeling, newly assigned to her service. Even Felix knelt, pledging himself as her temporary personal guard. Little Adonijah dreams of someone with a familiar face, though she can't remember who it is. When she wakes up, she realizes she's being carried by Felix, who cheerfully tells her that His Majesty wants to have breakfast with her. Adonijah blinks in confusion. Why would the emperor himself want breakfast with her? And why doesn't he have guards around? Felix laughs, saying Claude needs none. His magic is enough. Then he adds that the emperor would love to be woken by his little princess. Adonijah nearly faints. Waking the emperor sounds like suicide. Still, she enters his grand chamber, filled with treasures and even a golden map. She spots Claude sleeping in a chair and notices a portrait of a man who looks just like the one who banished her in her dream. Mischievously, she pinches his cheeks, but when he stirs, she panics and hums a lullaby somehow. It puts him back to sleep. Later, Claude wakes with slightly red cheeks, and Adonijah awkwardly tries to talk about the palace. He smiles faintly and lets her explore freely. Felix then announces a nobleman's arrival, and before Adonijah leaves, Claude casually tells her to have breakfast with him every morning to her surprise. Exploring the palace, Adonijah searches for a portrait of her mother, Diana, but finds only unfamiliar faces. Finally, she discovers a burned painting bearing her mother's name. Nearby, nobles gossip cruelly about her lack of magic and her mother's lowly background. Before they can mock further, Claude appears, his icy glare silencing them. He orders that Diana's name never be spoken again. Hidden, Athanasia realizes how deeply her mother's memory pains him. That night, she stares at the ruined painting, hums her lullaby, and falls asleep. The next morning, she joins Claude for breakfast again, trying to appear confident. He mostly listens in silence. When she tastes his tea and says, "It tastes like flowers blooming in my mouth," Claude freezes. Those were Diana's exact words. He quickly changes the subject, and Athanasia realizes she's struck a nerve. Heartbroken, she later burns her drawings of her mother. Meanwhile, Athanasia overhears Felix and Lillian discussing, showing her Claude's memories of Diana. Frightened, she begs them not to, fearing her father will hate her. Felix assures her Claude never hated her or Diana, showing her the palace's magic barrier which only she and Diana can freely pass. That night, Claude sits alone with the restored drawings. When Athanasia visits, saying she missed him, he hugs her and murmurs, "You're becoming bold, just like your mother." He teases her to sing the lullaby again, this time while he's awake. As she sings, Claude's magic fills the room with warmth and light, revealing memories of Diana smiling. Father and daughter watch together, their hearts softening. When the song ends, they drift to sleep side by side, surrounded by gentle light and long-forgotten peace. The emperor wished to assign Princess Athanasia a study partner, since her powers still hadn't awakened. The duke wasted no time and offered his son Smart, 3 years older, and apparently everyone's favorite overachiever. But in Athanasia's dreams, that same guy had introduced another girl as the future heir to the throne and used her to climb the royal ladder. Now, in the present, he supposedly liked that same girl too. Athanasia was convinced he just wanted to cozy up to her for power. Before anyone could say more, she cut them off. Yes, she knew the duke's son was talented, well-read, and probably thought he was some kind of prodigy. But so what? She'd already studied everything he had alone. She didn't want foolish friends. No one could match her in studies. The only thing he had over her was magic, which, to her, was an unfair advantage. They dropped the topic for another day. In Aeolus, there was a magical planetarium that measured how much magic someone had. The faster it spun, the stronger the person. When Athanasia tried it, though, it didn't move at all. Her father was powerful. Her mother had danced with magic in every motion, so how could she have none? 2 years passed. While her maid bought fruit in the market, people gossiped about how much the duke adored his daughter. He'd even built her a private library. Everyone assumed Athanasia would inherit the throne. Then a mysterious man appeared. He noticed something strange. The maid wasn't supposed to be alive. Her fate had been rewritten. Soon after, that annoying duke showed up again. 2 years hadn't changed him much. He worried that the princess still had no classmate and said he knew the perfect one, a girl his own age, whom he had taught personally. Athanasia's heart sank. It was the same girl from her dreams, the one destined to take her place. The newcomer was brilliant, especially in law. The plan was simple: get close to the princess, meet her father, and rise in power. But Athanasia didn't need law lessons. She could recite the whole code by heart. She was a true scholar, and she wanted classmates who were just as sharp. To make her point, she handed the duke a book in a foreign language, one she had translated herself. "I don't want foolish friends," she whispered. Before heading to the garden, her father gifted her a book she'd long desired, written by a nameless magician and filled with ancient spells. He warned her that it contained a powerful enchantment, one that might awaken her magic. He wasn't sure it would work, but it was worth trying. The moment she opened it, the book began to move. And suddenly, she saw the same mysterious man again. He had finally found her, the girl who could control destiny itself. But Athanasia was still just a child, so naturally, she assumed he was mistaken. Then, out of nowhere, Felix stepped forward and, with one swift motion, the man pushed him back using magic. Before leaving, the man gave him a warning. "Never finish that spell. It's too dangerous." After that, Felix remembered nothing. Still curious, he told the emperor that maybe the princess should have a friend her own age. The poor girl lived surrounded by adults and had no one to talk to. She must have been lonely. Meanwhile, Athanasia wasn't exactly impressed by the adults around her. In her mind, they were so useless they couldn't even control one child. Every morning, she sat for tea like royalty, the table overflowing with cakes. And now, finally, she was allowed to eat chocolate. Except, the ones she'd hidden in the kitchen had mysteriously disappeared. Her father, taking Felix's advice, asked gently if she wanted a friend her age. If she said yes, he'd find one. But she shook her head. "I already have friends and cakes. That's enough. I just want peace until I turn 18. Still, deep down, Athanasia knew she'd need to master magic if she wanted to change her destiny. So, ignoring the mysterious man's warning, she tried the spell again. The book's chains rattled and broke open. Suddenly, the same man appeared, staring right at her. "Are those eyes from the imperial family?" he asked. People with her jewel-like eyes were said to have died out 400 years ago. Her father was the current emperor, but those eyes were supposed to belong only to the ancient bloodline. The legend said that people with eyes like hers could wield immense power, yet she had none. So how had she managed to twist the threads of fate itself? The man decided she was too dangerous to know the truth and cast a spell to put her to sleep. But even as her consciousness faded, Athanasia refused to give up. He was about to end her life when a cloud appeared out of nowhere and swept her away. Terrified, she tried to cast a spell, and to her shock, a shimmering shield formed in front of her. For the first time, she smiled, thrilled by the spark of power. But her vision blurred, the world faded, and the last thing she saw was her father's boots, dripping with blood. As Athanasia collapsed from the wild surge of magic, panic tore through the palace. The king, terrified, ordered guards to summon the best healers in the empire. Soon, the Ruby Palace overflowed with top-tier wizards, but none could explain, let alone cure, her condition. One by one, they failed, leaving only silence and a worried king. Exhausted, the king stood by her bedside as Felix urged him to rest. But before he could, pain gripped his chest just as Lucas, the confident young sorcerer, entered the room, ready to take control. Meanwhile, in her dreams, Athanasia saw her mother singing softly before Lucas's voice interrupted, urging her to wake. Her eyes flickered open briefly, catching sight of him before she drifted off again. When she finally woke for real, Lucas teased her while she realized the pain in her chest was gone. He smugly revealed he'd saved her without him. Her heart would have exploded. Athanasia stared in disbelief, noticing he looked smaller than usual. When the king, Felix, and Lily entered, relief flooded the room. Lily wept, saying she'd prayed for her every day. Athanasia, touched, was stunned to learn she'd been asleep for a month. The king gently lifted her, asking if she felt pain. She assured him she was fine and asked if he'd worried. Of course he had. Lucas then cut in, explaining her magic had gone berserk and that he'd absorbed the excess to save her. The king anxiously asked if there were side effects. Lucas confidently said no and added that her magic was extraordinarily pure, powerful enough to make her the greatest ruler in history. Everyone was stunned. Lily cried with joy. Felix joked she might rival the king, but Lucas warned her power could surge again since her body wasn't ready. Right after that, he collapsed dramatically. The king rushed to help, but Lucas weakly insisted he was only drained, having used all his strength. The king, moved, promised him a reward and ordered him to stay at the palace to monitor her. Lucas bowed politely, but his sly grin revealed he was faking it. Athanasia saw through the act immediately. Soon after, the king decided she'd move from the Ruby Palace to the Emerald Palace, the traditional home of royal princesses. Athanasia froze. In her dreams, the Emerald Palace belonged to Jeanette, while she remained trapped in the Ruby Palace. Her fate had changed, but fear crept in that Jeanette's arrival might bring the tragedy back. Later that day, Athanasia tried measuring her magical energy, but the device didn't even react. She frowned, doubting all that talk about her immense power. Lucas, lounging nearby and casually eating chocolate, assured her he wasn't lying. He explained that her magic had been sealed to keep her from tearing herself apart. Without the seal, her body would have exploded from the overload. He reminded her that he was the one who saved her and expected a little gratitude. Athanasia wasn't convinced. She eyed him suspiciously and asked why someone claiming to be a great wizard looked like a child. Lucas replied that he'd been asleep for 400 years and was using this form because it conserved energy. Besides, he'd already used most of his remaining power to save her. Still unimpressed, Athanasia accused him of exaggerating his weakness to enjoy palace life and free food. Lucas didn't even deny it. In fact, he admitted that sounded way better than working. Her annoyance grew. She then accused him of stealing her chocolates too. He gasped in fake offense, claiming someone of his caliber would never do that. But before he could finish, she pointed at a tiny creature caught nibbling her sweets. Lucas chuckled and said she was half right, it wasn't him. With a snap of his fingers, a spark of magic hit the little creature, transforming it into a cute, fluffy cat. The creature immediately bolted into her arms for safety. She froze, then recognized it as the same being that had saved her life. Smiling, she thanked it softly. Lucas rolled his eyes and said it only acted on instinct. It was her familiar, a divine beast born from her own magic. Intrigued, Athanasia stroked its fur and asked if it liked sweets. Lucas admitted it did, probably because it shared her sweet tooth. She scolded the creature gently, and Lucas joked that it had learned bad habits from her. When he called it over, it clung tighter to Athanasia, trembling. She laughed, holding it protectively and declaring it was hers now. She named it Raven and asked if it would stay with her. Lucas sighed and warned her not to hold it too tightly. When she asked why, his tone darkened. Raven was made of her own magical energy. The last time she touched it directly, she had absorbed too much and nearly died. If it happened again, she wouldn't survive. Shaken, Athanasia asked what she should do. Lucas's answer was simple: learn to control your magic. The next day, Athanasia practiced magic under her tutor's watchful eye. For a moment, her floating spell worked, then fizzled out. Her tutor smiled awkwardly, calling it progress, though his tone betrayed concern. Later, he told Lily that Athanasia might have reached her limit. No amount of training could push her further. Back in her room, Athanasia sat frustrated, unable to steady her magic. She sighed, wondering what she was doing wrong until Raven shuffled over. Smiling, she picked it up and teased, "You really do take after me." Then, Lucas appeared on her balcony like he owned the place, claiming he was keeping an eye on her. With a flick, he magically pulled Raven away, saying it was for her own good. Arrogantly, he offered to teach her magic if she gave him Raven, boasting he was better than her tutors. Athanasia refused and demanded Raven back. Before she could argue further, Lucas sensed something and quickly returned it just as the king walked in. Lucas bowed, while Athanasia hid Raven behind her back. When the king asked what she was hiding, Lucas smoothly explained it was a magical creature born from her overflowing energy, one he was studying. The king's face darkened with concern. He asked if that creature had caused her previous collapse. Athanasia tried to explain, but Lucas jumped in again, saying that killing the creature might release unstable magic back into her body. He suggested letting it live under supervision instead. Very noble of him, considering it helped him too. Realizing Lucas was secretly backing her up, Athanasia quickly agreed and begged her father to let her keep Raven. After some hesitation, the king finally sighed and gave in, but only if she held it for 1 hour each day. Athanasia's face lit up with joy as she ran to hug him, saying she loved him. While practicing magic again, Athanasia's spell fizzled, then exploded, leaving her coughing in smoke and frustration. She groaned, wondering who had sealed her magic, until an apple smacked her head. Lucas stood there, unimpressed, scolding her for recklessness and warning that one mistake could kill her. Annoyed but knowing he was right, Athanasia glared at him. Lucas pointed to her shattered spell circle, saying her lack of control could destroy her. Determined, she asked him to teach her, but he refused, claiming he saw no reason to help someone who disliked him. Then his stomach growled. Embarrassed, he admitted he needed to regain energy, but there was no quick fix. Athanasia suddenly realized her overflowing magic could recharge him, sparking an idea for a deal. Soon after, she met her father and Duke Eel, who warmly welcomed her back. She recognized him and thought he sure didn't waste time returning. Felix mentioned they'd been discussing her potential companions. Curious, she asked if that included Duke Snowy's son. The Duke said his son was still abroad, but Jeanette admired her and wished to be her friend. The king assured Athanasia she didn't have to agree, but she smiled, saying it might be nice to have friends. Delighted, the Duke promised to send Jeanette soon just as Lucas barged in, declaring he'd oversee Athanasia's growth. The Duke's smile instantly vanished. Training began and Lucas's methods were brutal. First, he had her channel magic into a pen. It didn't move. Next, potion making her healing potion exploded. So he switched to physical training, making her run laps for stamina, then balance training to synchronize her energy with nature, essentially wizard yoga. That night, he assigned her an overwhelming stack of advanced reading, including spatial analytical geometry. Horrified but resolute, she studied tirelessly. Her days became a blur of dawn runs, endless practice, and late nights studying until she collapsed over her desk. One night, Lucas found her asleep with her magic still humming and quietly acknowledged how hard she was working. A month later, she proudly announced she'd finished her studies and asked for the next step. Lucas stared at her intently, asking why she was pushing herself so hard. She answered simply because her life depended on it, but his expression made her wonder if that was all. Later, while walking with her father, his hair got caught in her hairpin. She gently untangled it, refusing Felix's help, and when he asked how it looked, she smiled and said it was perfect. That night, Felix brought the king a report confirming Lucas's true identity. He was from the imperial family, though much of his past was lost. The king asked if keeping him near Athanasia was dangerous. Felix admitted it could be, but the king used magic to confirm Lucas's harmlessness. Relieved, he dismissed Felix, who noted how deeply the king cared for Athanasia. Left alone, the king gazed out the window, quietly wondering for the first time what it truly meant to love. Athanasia believed she could master anything if she just worked hard enough, but she couldn't have been more wrong. Frustrated, she lashed out at Lucas, accusing him of being the worst teacher ever. He just shrugged, asking if she really expected him to spoon-feed her every little thing. She argued that she was still learning and wanted him to be a bit nicer. But Lucas, ever the smug wizard, explained that magic was about channeling your own energy and forming a bond with the elements. Basically, figure it out yourself. When his vague explanation pushed her over the edge, she smacked him and demanded that he start acting like an actual teacher. Lucas just laughed, calling her a weird kind of genius. Annoyed, she begged him to take her training seriously, complaining that he made her do everything while he barely moved a finger. In response, Lucas casually showed off objects floated, tea poured itself, and the room cleaned up in seconds. He explained that this was his magic, but hers would have to come from her own effort. When Athanasia realized he really meant "you're on your own," she snapped, asking if he couldn't at least show her one tiny spell. Lucas refused, saying that magic that isn't earned can never truly belong to her. She demanded proper instructions. He laughed again, asking if she was finally admitting she was an idiot. Furious, she crossed her arms and refused to answer. Later at breakfast, she zoned out staring at a pomegranate, mumbling that she'd been trying to convince it to split open. Her father, King Felix, chuckled before gently advising her not to force things if it felt too hard. She should find another way. Encouraged, Athanasia decided she'd figure it out herself. Sometime later, Athanasia lay on the sofa, exhausted from studying. Lucas commented on her lack of manners, and she blamed his harsh training methods. He told her this was how magic had always been taught for the last 400 years. Surprised, she asked if he'd learned that way too, and he said yes. That's when she realized just how ancient he might be. Still, she admitted she didn't trust him. She knew nothing about who he really was. When she asked his real name or purpose, he only said, "I'm a great wizard." That's it. Athanasia called him impossible and muttered that maybe she should have asked Duke Alpheus's son to teach her instead. Lucas raised an eyebrow and coolly replied, "Oh, really?" She compared the boy favorably nicer, more patient, not arrogant like Lucas. Amused, Lucas teased her, saying it sounded like she wanted to be friends with the boy. Before she could argue, he suddenly laughed and teleported her into the sky. Athanasia screamed as she plummeted, completely blanking on how to use magic. Just before she hit the ground, a young boy caught her. Ezekiel, Duke Alpheus's son. Flustered, she apologized, but he just stared at her and asked if she was an angel. Caught off guard, she nervously said yes. But Ezekiel quickly noticed her bright blue eyes, the signature of the royal family, and realized who she really was. Still, he politely called her Lady Angel and asked why she fell from the sky. Before she could explain, his father appeared. Athanasia hid while the Duke scolded Ezekiel for wandering off. The Duke reminded him of his upcoming studies abroad, while Ezekiel worried about leaving his sister, Janet. His father dismissed his concerns, saying family duty came first and hinting that if the princess had liked him, he wouldn't have to leave at all. Hidden nearby, Athanasia realized this was all part of the Duke's plan. After his father left, Athanasia stepped out and asked if Ezekiel was okay. Though he smiled and said he was fine, she could see the sadness in his eyes. She decided to stay a little longer and listen. Sitting together under the quiet sky, Ezekiel admitted he felt trapped by his responsibilities. Being the heir wasn't freedom, it was a cage. Athanasia sympathized, then joked that he should just finish his studies quickly and prove his father wrong. He laughed for real this time, saying she was right, his father's coldness was just tough love. Hearing that, she smiled, admiring his resolve. But before she could say anything more, a magic circle flared under her feet and poof, she was teleported back home. Lucas stood there smirking, saying she looked like she'd had fun and was probably about to stay for dinner. Furious, Athanasia slapped him hard. He blinked, asking what that was for, and she shouted that it was for everything, sending her off without warning, yanking her back, and doing whatever he wanted without caring about her feelings. Lucas casually replied, "Didn't you want to be friends with Snowy's son?" which only made her angrier. She yelled that he never listened, never helped, and always acted like an annoying know-it-all. On top of that, she didn't even get to say goodbye to Ezekiel. Now he probably thought she just vanished like a rude ghost. Lucas frowned, clearly unimpressed, and began casting another spell. "If it bothers you that much," he said coolly, "you can always go back and explain yourself." Before he could finish, Athanasia snapped, yelling for him not to make things even more complicated. Fed up, she turned away and muttered that she couldn't stand being around him another second. Athanasia, fuming, stormed out of the room. Lily called after her that dinner was almost ready, but she ignored her and kept walking. As she crossed the quiet garden, her anger burned hotter. She swore she wouldn't speak to Lucas ever again. Reaching the lake, she collapsed onto the grass, frustration melting into despair. 2 whole weeks had passed, and she still couldn't use any new magic. Lucas's cryptic words, "acquire it yourself," echoed in her mind, and a chill ran through her. What if her dreams were starting to come true? A soft voice echoed from the lake, freezing Athanasia in place. It was her mother's. The rippling water formed her mother's smiling face, telling her it was okay if she couldn't use magic. Hope filled Athanasia's heart as she reached out, but the image vanished like mist. Suddenly, the lake pulled her under. Tangled roots from the dream lotus wrapped around her legs, dragging her into the cold depths. Sensing the magical disturbance, Lucas teleported to the source. Beneath the water, Athanasia struggled for air, remembering his words, "Magic is the act of using your own energy to command the elements to make them one with your will." Focusing with all her strength, she released a surge of power that formed a massive droplet, lifting her from the lake. Lucas arrived just in time to see her rise. Gasping but glowing with pride, she had used real magic, her own. Lucas feigned indifference. "I wasn't coming to save you. I was just passing by." Catching her breath, Athanasia smiled brightly and thanked him, asking if he'd keep teaching her. He nodded, pretending to be bored but clearly agreeing. As they walked back under the moonlight, Lucas broke the silence. "You really had the nerve to punch me, huh? Brave for someone your size." Athanasia grinned. "What, planning to hit me back?" He sighed. "No, I don't fight children," she smirked. "Funny, you don't look that much older than me." When they reached the palace, Lily hurried over, worried. Athanasia claimed she'd just been lying on the grass, only for her father's voice to sound behind her. "Just lying on the grass, was it?" Felix appeared, eyeing them suspiciously. And what kind of magic practice was this? Before Athanasia could respond, he grabbed Lucas by the collar and picked her up with his other hand. A scene the maids would surely gossip about for days. As Athanasia chanted, a teacup floated smoothly into her hand. Delighted, she looked to Lucas, who nodded approvingly, though he credited his own teaching. When she teased that she'd worked hard too, he decided to show off, raising everything around them into the air. Startled, Athanasia yelled for him to stop, and with a flick, everything including her crashed down. Smugly, Lucas asked if she was impressed. Half annoyed, she admitted he was amazing. Then he sipped from a teacup hers and she demanded it back. Later, frustrated with her slow progress, Athanasia decided to ask Akil for help and realized she'd never said goodbye to him properly. When she asked Lucas to send her to the Duke's mansion, he teased, "You sure it's help you want, not the Duke's son?" She rolled her eyes, but he refused, claiming his mana was too valuable. When she pointed out his recent magic display, he reminded her she'd scolded him last time. So she flattered him, calling him the most powerful and handsome mage alive, until he sighed and cast the spell. Unfortunately, she appeared high above the Duke's mansion and fell straight down the chimney. A log then hit her head. Akil was staring in shock. Trying to play it cool, she greeted him, saying she'd come to bother him again. He chuckled that she always found new ways to surprise him and helped her out of the fireplace. When she joked about being a fairy tale angel, he dryly replied, "I've never heard of one that enters through chimneys." As he brushed ashes from her dress, she noticed his gentle warmth. When he commented that her eyes looked different, she froze, remembering Lucas had changed them to his garnet hue, and quickly told him to stop staring. Then, when Akil asked why she'd come, she admitted she hadn't said goodbye. Smiling, he said he was glad to see her again. He'd even wished for it that morning, making her blush. Noticing his packed bags, she asked about them. He said he was leaving for Atlanta in 2 days to study. The name made her heart sink. Atlanta was far away, far from the peaceful life fate had planned for him. As she stepped back, she tripped over a book, but Akil caught her. When she tried to pick it up, he stopped her gently. Watching him, Athanasia realized how much he'd changed, already becoming the man fate intended him to be. Just then, someone knocked. It was Jeanette. Akil greeted her warmly. She offered to help him clean, then invited him to the greenhouse to see the roses. Athanasia quietly observed, her heart tightening at how natural they seemed together. Jeanette was every bit the gentle, radiant girl Athanasia had seen in her dreams, the one destined to be loved by everyone. As Athanasia turned away, a voice suddenly spoke behind her. It was Lucas. Startled, she asked when he'd appeared. Ignoring her panic, he asked who the other person was. "You mean Akil?" she asked. "No," Lucas replied calmly. "The girl, Jeanette. Tell me, is she a chimera?" Athanasia blinked, confused. Lucas explained, "A chimera is a child changed through black magic." Meanwhile, in the greenhouse, Jeanette cheerfully took Akil's hand, pulling him along to show him something. Lucas and Athanasia secretly followed, hidden by a magical shroud. When Athanasia whispered, asking what he was doing, Lucas replied, observing. "Don't interrupt." Watching Jeanette laugh with Akil, he frowned. "No matter how I look at her," he murmured, "her mana isn't purely royal. There's something else in it, something dark, a trace of black magic." Athanasia instantly snapped, saying Lucas was going too far. He just smirked, clearly enjoying himself, and teased her for defending Jeanette so fiercely. Then, raising an eyebrow, he pointed out that Jeanette also had the blue eyes of the royal family and slyly asked if she was Athanasia's sister. Athanasia froze, stammering that she didn't know. Lucas didn't seem to care. He simply turned away and said they should keep following. Fuming, Athanasia called after him, accusing him of being a stalker, and ran to stop whatever nonsense he had planned next. Up in the greenhouse, Akil smiled softly and asked Jeanette what song she wanted to hear. She beamed, saying she loved anything he played. With a calm nod, he sat down at the piano, his fingers gliding over the keys as a gentle melody filled the room. Meanwhile, Athanasia and Lucas were still sneaking closer. Athanasia whispered that they should leave, this was too private, but of course, Lucas ignored her completely, curiosity written all over his face. As the music flowed, Jeanette's smile slowly faded. Without realizing it, tears slipped down her cheeks. From a distance, Athanasia gasped Jeanette was crying. Akil noticed immediately, stopping mid-song, concern flashing in his eyes. Jeanette quickly wiped her tears, embarrassed, saying she didn't mean to cry, she just wanted to hear him play. Akil smiled softly, promising he'd play again, but Jeanette shook her head and said she wanted to hear him play forever. With a sigh, Akil told her that his father wanted him to study abroad. Jeanette's face fell. She begged him to let her talk to the Duke so he could stay, but Akil gently said it was his own choice, he wanted to go. Her voice trembled as she asked why, reminding him that he always listened to her and that he loved her most. Akil stood and hugged her gently, saying this time was different. Jeanette burst into tears, saying he was the only one who cared for her and that if he left, she'd be all alone. Akil promised he'd write to her, but she only cried harder, clinging to him as he whispered an apology. Watching them from the shadows, Athanasia felt her chest tighten. Jeanette's pain reminded her too much of her own lonely dreams where her father always turned away no matter how hard she cried. Both she and Jeanette had grown up without warmth, both longing for someone who would stay. For reasons she couldn't explain, Athanasia suddenly wanted to see her father. Lucas, standing beside her, glanced down and murmured, "She must have seen the future." Athanasia frowned, snapping that not even her father could do that and accusing Lucas of spouting nonsense. But he only smirked, saying Jeanette wasn't an ordinary child. Before she could question him, he turned to leave, saying they were done here. Athanasia hurried after him, taking one last look back and whispering a silent goodbye to Akil and Jeanette. Back at the palace, the king and Felix were strolling through the royal garden when Athanasia came running, calling for her father. He turned just in time for her to leap into his arms, saying how much she'd missed him. Amused, he teased that she always appeared whenever she pleased, lifting her with ease. Felix chuckled that she was extra lively today, almost like Raven. Athanasia giggled, asking if she was just as adorable. Felix declared she was the cutest in the entire continent, earning a sharp glare from the king, who warned him not to spoil her and to keep 10 feet away. As they walked, the king asked why she'd come. Athanasia said she'd been busy studying magic and missed him. When he asked if it was tiring, she admitted it was but said she wouldn't give up. Smiling, he praised her determination, saying he'd thought she'd quit once it got hard but admired her resolve. He told her to keep going and never give up. Looking up, Athanasia softly asked if he'd always love her. Surprised, he asked why, and she said she just wanted to hear it. Without hesitation, he promised he would. Her face brightened. "Then it's a promise," she said. "Things will always stay this way." That night, Athanasia lay in bed flipping through her hand-drawn picture book of magical worlds, realizing how much had changed. Her father no longer rejected her. Akil wasn't as cold as she'd thought, and Jeanette only wanted love. Maybe her dreams had made her see too narrowly. Meanwhile, Lucas sat alone on the rooftop, gazing at the stars with a faint smile. He could feel fate shifting and wondered how far the little princess would go in rewriting the future once set in stone.